So the car's outside again now, brought her outside because someone's put a dyno in the way of doing the engine job indoors. So we're going to have to do it out here. So we spun the car around so it's facing indoors, and now we're going to bring the engine out and swing it in and see what the situation is, if it stops raining again for a long. Well, as you can see, and sadly due to an epic video fail, the engine is actually now in the car. There is no video footage of this going on whatsoever. I have got a couple of photos which I'll stick in now. But me and Chris basically pushed on. We've been having rain in between the harvest at the minute, and obviously been extremely busy on the farm trying to combine. But we did have a day where we weren't combining due to some issues, and we were determined to try and get this at least swung into the engine bay to line everything up and see what we needed to do. And the rain stopped for 10 minutes, and it was kind of because we had to do it outside. We aren't able to actually lift the engine inside my workshop at the moment because the dyno kind of makes that impossible. So we took it outside in the 10 minutes we had no rain, got the engine up on the crane and started swinging it in, and before we knew it, it was kind of in. The grinder was out. We had to make a few modifications to sort of clear things like I said in the previous video, but not actually anything like as much as I thought. The engine actually fitted in with fairly minor alterations to a left hand side, so it was kind of in before we knew it, and back in the workshop to try and get it back out because it started raining. Right, so the first step we've got on with here now is we've just put the bonnet back on to check the clearances between the bonnet and the engine, which is obviously the next problem. We got a few small problems. One of the turbos is just close to a low point on the bonnet, which I think we can actually clearance on the turbo itself, because it's where there's a mounting tab on the compressor housing that doesn't need to be there. But I'm not really sure how that compressor housing is going to be orientated yet. So don't really want to go messing with that until, but either way, it's actually on a low point on the bonnet that, worst case scenario, I can actually clearance the bonnet. It's on one of the struts there. And again, on the other side, the pulley on the high pressure pump is a millimetre from touching the same strut, but on the left hand side of the bonnet at the end of my finger there. Again, we're going to have to clearance the bonnet there, but at least it's a part of the bonnet where you've got an inch of extra material that you can lose. So other than that, the bonnet is clearing everything, which is good news, because that was going to be a bit of a pain if it didn't. So I've just been working on the gear linkages. That was another thing that obviously could provide problems. It's got a sat shift on here from Satchel Engineering, but obviously it's designed to fit a stock GTI 6, not a 16 valve twin turbo diesel, but it actually fits surprisingly well. I haven't had to modify anything, just shorten up the rod slightly to get my alignment right on my gear stick, and that is now completely hooked up. So I'll go in underneath just so you can have a look at that. Right, we're just getting underneath the car now. I've got Chris up in the car to do a demonstration. Hopefully we've got enough light. I didn't bring a torch. So you can see up behind where my manifold is here too, and now everything clears quite well. I was really expecting there to be some problems there. Just work that again, Chris. But everything clears perfectly. And I'll tell you what, the gear change is so positive now. It does feel incredible. Short and positive and just sort of direct. So that's great news. Right on, good evening. As you remember in the last video, we got the engine back in the car. And got the car back inside again, pretty much sat on the mounts, so that was a pretty good step forwards. So I've had it in here now, just sort of connecting up some of the bits and pieces and sort of sorting out the mounts more finally. Now I've got a slight problem which was kind of anticipated with the mounting of the engine, from going from the BE3 transmission which we had before to the BE4 for my hydraulic clutch side of things. Because the BE4 is fitted to later Peugeots, namely sort of EWs and later DWs, the angle of the engine basically changed at a certain point. It's around 2004, I think. I don't know whether it was just sort of overnight. I think it was more, some models, some engines did and some didn't, and eventually they all sort of do now. But anyway, when they went across, they went from the more traditional Peugeot engines, which seem to sit at 30 degrees, to what they are now, which is more like 15. So the engine, which was lying back in the car sort of like that, is now come forward. Now, the way they seem to basically actually do that with existing cars, because obviously there's still DW10s and stuff going in new cars, and they haven't changed the block or anything, so they seem to have changed the bow housing on the BE4 to accommodate a 15 degree engine. So obviously when you have an engine that was sitting at 30 degrees and you bolt on the transmission which wants the engine to be sitting at 15, there's obviously a difference then between the engine and the gearbox to which way it wants to be. So obviously it's trying to twist the engine up and the engine's trying to twist the gearbox back, which is obviously no good at all. Now I actually want the engine to sit at 15 degrees. It's actually quite beneficial for what I'm trying to do here in terms of space around the back of the engine and a few other reasons. So we dropped it in on the same bottom mounts originally just to see how things lined up, and immediately we obviously had some problems, but it was good enough to sort of get the engine in and move the car back inside because I can change them around afterwards. So I flipped the bottom mount on the engine now over to a more modern one, which has pulled the bottom of the engine in and also back slightly, which has obviously uprighted the engine somewhat. The transmission mount is being left stock because I don't want the engine to move left or right, which it does if you move it around, and it's actually exactly where I want it to be anyway. So the only thing that needs to change then to get the engine in line and supported is the top mount. Now I've looked through every kind of vehicle I can imagine, and there just doesn't seem to be a stock PSA top engine mount bracket that is going to work straight in a 306 to make this engine sit at 15 degrees. I could be wrong, there may be something, but I've looked at everything and I can't find anything. Even on vehicles that had 15 degree and 30 degree engines, they don't seem to change that bracket. They seem to make the alterations elsewhere. So anyway, I decided it would be easier just to make a bracket anyway, because I'm using the Volvo style engine mount on the engine. None of the Peugeot ones actually line up properly anyway, so I have to obviously re-drill the holes in it. So I'm halfway there before I've started. So we're going to make up basically a new top mount to sit in that position there. So where you can see it now is where we want the engine to be. Obviously when it's on an original mount, the actual engine sits back there. The piece that comes out for the chassis side of the mount comes out in front of the mount. So I've got the engine pulled forward now where we want it to be, and it's just sat on a jack underneath. And you can see when the engine's in this position, it's all sitting parallel with the car, and obviously level with the car as well. Just about see if you look across there. And obviously the engine is now sat at 15 degrees, which means that the peg on the gearbox in there is sitting straight up and it's happy again. Obviously before, when it was on the other mounts, it was all pulled back because the engine was, fighting with the gearbox, all trying to misalign. So the next step really is going to be to make up this top mount. So it's fairly straightforward. It's just going to be a plate, I think, with some sort of gussets on top of it to put some strength into it. So I'm going to make some measurements now and then get some steel up on the bench and we'll go from there. Right, Lawrence, we've got this plate here now. So we're going to put four pilot holes in that. You can see I've just got them marked out with a centre punch. So this is going to be the bottom part of the engine mount, which aligns with the 4 bolt holes on the actual mount on the car itself. So it's going to come in and bore those out, and then we'll take them out to a 10mm afterwards. For anyone that's interested, this drill press is one of the cheapest and most Chinese things you can purchase. I actually acquired it for free. It was that bad of someone, but 3 years later, I still find myself using it because, well, quite frankly, it gets the job done. But it is extremely Chinese, and you have to be very steady on the thing. And it hasn't got much of a table space, so you can't do anything very big with it. We could do with an upgrade, but for now it does do the job, and it saves doing it with a bloody pistol drill and drilling everything on the piss. Right, so we've taken out those 4 pilots there now. This is obviously just rough finished at the moment. I've got to trim it up to make it look better and fit in with the other plate in a minute. So we'll change out now to a 10mm. And come in again. There you go. So that will then form the bottom half of the engine mount. The camera's not focusing as normal. There you go. So that'll form the bottom half of the mount. They'll be welded together, and then there'll be some sort of strengthening parts on the top. Sorry about the camera work. I know we're getting all of the complaints about the camera work at the moment, but a lot of the time I just don't have time to set the camera recording. Right, so there you can see I've just welded those two pieces together now. So I've just ground round all the other edges to make that sort of appear as a solid piece. You can just see the unground weld underneath there. You won't see that because that'll be sat that way round. So that'll sit on the engine like that. Obviously that bolts the engine, that bolts the car. So I think what I'll do now is just weld some gussets in through here on a 90 degree just to add some strength. It's obviously already more than strong enough, I think, but it wouldn't do any harm, so we'll just beef that up a little bit. Kind of skipped ahead a little bit again. I keep forgetting to pick the camera up. So I welded the two pieces together, ground it all back flush, and I've just added some bracing here to put some strength in it that way. Here we go, quick lick of paint to tidy it up, and that's ready to bolt to the car now. Just bolted that up now to the engine, sitting quite nicely, so that's how we wanted it to end up. Managed to retain the original, obviously it's sitting on top of that aftermarket mount underneath, but we have managed to retain those stock bushes there just to try and help stop it moving forward in the back. So that's all sat in there pretty. So we're actually going to kick this out of here now because I need to get the 305 in the workshop to do some work on that. So she's going out into the other barn for a couple of weeks probably, so this will probably be the last update for a week or two now.
Push it. I bloody push it. Hey, line your side.